Hey everybody, it is the Customer and the Service. I'm John Lemastny and this is Sean. Hey Sean.
Hey John, how are you?
How are you?
I'm doing great.
So Sean Petrowski and I talk about customer service, and we talk about best practices, things we run into, things we would like to see more of, and ideas for enterprise, small business to try to make the most of customer service. So today, one topic that we wanted to talk about was the idea of reasonable expectations in customer service, or as customer service. And the reason I bring this up is because I recently had the opportunity to take on a client, and this was in graphic design. Somebody who reached out to me, who heard about me or saw my sketches blog or something, heard through the grapevine that I did graphic design and that I was, reasonable to work with. And I heard about the project, got together for the first time, and usually my own policy is the first hour is always free. That's just something I do. And the reason I do that is because you never know whether or not you're going to like the person that you work with, and you never know whether, despite the fact that I like myself, it doesn't guarantee that somebody else is going to like me, and I don't want them to pay to have to find out that they don't like me or that I don't like them. And so either one of us can just walk away after an hour. And in this particular case, I'm not going to be walking away, but I am devising a way to convince this person to change their approach. Because all I'm doing is graphic design. I'm taking some sketches of ideas that they have for a presentation and beautifying those ideas. In other words, applying color, font, and visual communication guidelines to these ideas. The problem is, though, that I don't think that the way that they are going about these ideas is very sensible. And so I feel like it's my responsibility as a good representative of customer service to tell them that, to let them know, I'm happy to do this work for you if it helps you, but I have to say, based on my experience, this is not the right approach. So I wondered, Sean, what experience do you have with talking down people from solutions that are not the best solutions for them, even though they are convinced otherwise?
Well, I have a couple different approaches when I get into situations like that, and it's actually, believe it or not, a situation that I find to be pretty common, both in my professional work, side work, and also, just in kind of everyday life, where people have a certain idea or expectation in their head about what they want or what they think the type of solution that they need or product that they want, and you have to really, if whether they're your friend or your customer or an associate, sometimes you're obligated to give advice on how to proceed with those in those areas. And I'm the type of person, John, as providing the best service possible to whoever, like I said, customer, associate, or personal friend, is of the utmost importance to me. So, if I hear somebody saying, in 2013, oh, I really want to get this. Actually, just had this the other day. Somebody at work was saying, oh, I want to buy this laptop because it's, so cheap. And then looking at the specifications of the laptop, I realized the technology in the laptop was a couple generations old. And even though the price seemed cheap for a current laptop, when considering what it is you were paying for, it really wasn't as great of a deal. So I had to actually inform that person, listen, this isn't the right way to go. You need to.
This wasn't the Chromebook Pixel, was it?
Definitely not. No, definitely not the Chromebook Pixel. You need to consider what's currently on the market. You need to look at these models and this configuration and look at the price points, and this is really where you need to be going. But It happens to me all the time, and I'm just, forward, polite. I've even been contacted for, and I don't really do too much web work anymore on the side. Yeah. I've kind of gotten out of that game almost entirely. I have like one organization that I'm still supporting, and I'm cutting them off at the end of this academic year. But I still get contacts.
It's a tough business, is it not?
It's what?
It's a tough business, is it not?
It can be. I
don't mean it's difficult work. I mean that from a politic perspective and from I used to love web work when it was about building sites, but it doesn't seem to be about building sites anymore. Now it's about convincing people that they don't need 100 things on their page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of the thing. This organization that I volunteer I don't even get paid for what I do. I volunteer my time and have for probably the last 5 years. I only volunteered my time because of the person that was leading the organization at the time. And I've stayed on with two different administrations beyond the guy that I originally partnered with. And it's just gotten to a point where, it's like you said, you're convincing people that their ideas for their website are bad, because it really is bad. And, you have to manage expectations, and that's a whole other thing. And it's just got to be a point where, I don't see a point anymore. So, but that is something you have to deal with. I want to put this banner on the top of my page that has blinking HTML text, and I want to put these animated GIFs of mermaids swimming left and right. And it's like, no, you don't. And so you have to get creative with ways to kind of explain people to convince them that their idea is bad. And it's difficult sometimes. And for the most part, I've been pretty successful at that. But
is this some sort of a porn site that you're working on?
No, it's a political organization.
It's not a mermaid porn site?
No, okay. I wish it was.
What political organization has spinning mermaids?
No, and that was a hypothetical. They don't want. That wasn't what it was. But there have been other ideas equally as dumb as that, though.
I hear you. I figured as much.
So yeah. So again, it's something that we have to be conscious of as service providers, and we need to. I think, like I said, you're doing your customer a disservice. Even if I've done this myself. I've had somebody approach me recently to do a website for them, and it would have been a huge payday for me if I followed through on it. But going through the discussions with the potential customer, realized, number one, this person's expectations were not correct. They did not really have a real grasp of what the website would do for them or how it really should be used. And at the end of the day, I ended up walking away saying, I don't think I'm the right person for you. You better be better off working with somebody else.
Well, it's funny. I've run into that situation too, where I realized suddenly that my philosophy doesn't match with their philosophy, or the product or idea that they're trying to sell doesn't really have anything to do with mine, and it makes it very difficult for me to take it on and be proud of it or use it in my portfolio. It would be like, I don't know, something in which animals were harmed or something.
Mm-hmm.
It would be difficult for me to somehow help them to succeed in continuing to herd animals. And in that particular situation, I don't even necessarily pass on, I don't think you should be doing this because my philosophy doesn't necessarily match. I just say, like you said beautifully, I don't think I'm the right person. I have gotten into the business, though, of trying to connect them with other people who would be more willing to do it. And I've been trying to do that more in general, like I think we may have talked about, but if not, I have shifted recently from being an end node, in other words, the service provider, to a person who connects need and service.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's somehow more value in that for me right now in my career. And I've seen a couple people do it beautifully, really, really well, and have gotten a name for this connectivity. you know, being sort of the space between as opposed to either end. And I've realized that that really wasn't a part of my history, and it was something that I really am trying to do now. And instead of loading myself up with more work and more work and more work, starting to think, you know, Sean P. would be a really good person for this. I wonder if he'd be interested. And there have been a couple times when that has happened in the past, and I've said, but I could do that work. I could do that work. And instead of doing that, now I'll say, hey, Sean, are you interested in doing some consulting work for this organization? You know? So I think there's a lot of good advice in what we're saying, you know, in trying to steer people in the right way, even if it's not us. And I think that's a little bit, not antithetical, but definitely parenthetical to what we talked about before, being the be-all, end-all service provider and trying to come to a solution as quickly as possible as opposed to pushing somebody to another person. Sometimes there is value in pushing somebody to another person if you are not the right person.
Remind me again what our term is for solutionism. What is it?
It's called productive solutionism.
Okay, so taking your current stance right now of being a facilitator, someone who connects dots.
Yeah.
I've been doing that myself probably for the last 7 years. I've been doing that, connecting people to help get jobs. I mean, I've actually launched a bunch of careers in the graphic design space, in IT space, in the financial space. I mean, industries I have no connections with, but know people in those industries, know people looking for work in those industries, and making connections happen in that space. Exactly as you said, getting solicited for IT work on the side, not being interested in it, but putting it out, referring it to people that I know who would be. This is all part of solutionism. And
well, that's interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily made that connection, but now that we're talking about it, it seems perfectly clear that it is.
Yeah. Again, you people are coming to us. We very well could solve the problem ourselves. But in some cases, that's not the best solution. So by connecting our customers with another service provider, making that introduction, you know, bringing those two parties together, that is part of productive solutionism.
I love it. So we had a little talk last week about some predictions.
We did. We talked about Sony's new PlayStation 4. And I watched the 2-hour and 15-minute presentation on my web browser last Thursday, and I gotta say, it was a pretty impressive presentation. Even though they did not reveal what the system actually looks like, they did not say a date that it's coming out. They did not reveal its price. For a big reveal, they really didn't reveal a lot of the things you would expect. But they talked about the philosophies behind, like what's driving them to create this new platform, and the decisions that they've made for certain hardware architecture and other things. And I'm definitely on board with the philosophy behind Sony's philosophy for their next generation of consoles. So that, you know, but again, philosophy is basically one thing, and execution of that philosophy is another. So if I decided I'm going to buy a PlayStation 4, no, I'm waiting to see how it's executed. But we had two areas of concern for customers, and one of those areas was backwards compatibility with older games. So that issue was explicitly addressed during the presentation, and we were told that no physical media, so a PlayStation 3 Blu-ray, a PlayStation 2 DVD, or a PlayStation 1 CD, will work in the new PlayStation 4 at all. And the reason for that is because there is a technical reason why. they are making a major hardware architectural change for the PlayStation 4. As you may or may not know, Sony partnered with IBM in 2005 or 2004 to develop a processor called the Cell processor, which was a 9-core. What's that?
I did not know that.
Okay. There's a great book called The Race to Develop the Next Gaming Console, and it's specifically written from the perspective of the guy who headed up the custom chip projects at IBM for both Microsoft and Sony. It's a fascinating read, and I strongly recommend anybody who's interested in technology or gaming space or even like what goes into custom chip. It's an excellent read. Anyway, so they're changing. They developed this microchip architecture, which was a 9-core processor. It was billed as the most advanced processor ever, and IBM equally put in just as much money as Sony to have this developed because they felt that there would be a market to sell it as a chip for computers and medical equipment and all kinds of different applications. Well, turned out that wasn't the case. The Cell processor was a bust, and because of that, the PlayStation 3 has been notoriously difficult for developers to develop software for. It was a very advanced chip, but the development tools that Sony developed along with IBM to utilize that chip were just, they never were able to meet the expectations of game developers. So PlayStation 4, Sony said, we're done with the custom chip. We're going to actually just use a standard x86 chip. And they've been engaging developers over the past, I guess, 5 years or so, and they are now developing tools that will become so much easier than what it was before and make it the PlayStation 4 an easy platform to develop for. So because of this architecture change to an x86 processor, there is no compatibility whatsoever with any of the existing games. Now, they said that that there may be something in the future that may come. I don't know if you know this, John, but there were 2 streaming gaming services. OnLive was one. The other one was Gaikai, or I always say Gaikai, but I don't think that's right. Either way, Sony bought Gaikai for a couple $100 million earlier this year.
Why are you not including Steam in that list?
Because Steam is not a streaming. What I mean is literally there's a data center with supercomputing capabilities, and you're remotely connecting to that supercomputer and playing the game on that supercomputer. Where Steam, you're physically downloading the software to your machine and playing the software from your machine.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like a remote connection.
I didn't really think about it that way, but of course, yeah.
So they bought this company for their infrastructure, and so they're promising that backwards compatibility will be provided through the Gaikai infrastructure. So you'll be able to stream your PlayStation 1, 2, and 3 games on the PlayStation 4. But that's it. That's all they said. They haven't announced any formal pricing or when it'll be available, but that's what they're saying, that their major investment in that network was partially due to the fact that they want to use it for backwards compatibility for their customers.
Well, that makes sense. So does that mean I'm going to have to repurchase those? I don't own any of those titles. Would I have to repurchase those games in order to play them over?
That's a good question. And when Sony moved from the PlayStation Portable, which was based on the UMD physical disc format, to the PlayStation Vita, which has it's a memory card format, they actually did a program in Japan where there was a special application you would download on your PSP, and you would physically put in every game that you had, and your PSP would register that with Sony. So basically, it would create a license that could be used by the Vita, because the Vita, like I said, is not compatible with that media. So
it's almost like CDDB. You put in the media, it recognizes it on a remote site, and therefore you have rights to it.
Correct, yes. So once you did that, you were able to repurchase the games for a nominal cost. the cost was like $1.25 or something. It was literally like the bandwidth cost to download that title to the new system. They did not do that program in America for reasons that were never explained.
I can tell you why.
The people are anticipating that if they do follow through with the streaming backwards compatibility network, that there will be some sort of similar program to allow people to not have to repurchase those games for full price.
So on the prediction of whether or not there will be backwards compatibility with pre-existing system games, the answer is yes and no.
Right, but I would say mostly no.
Okay. What was our other prediction?
The other area that we were talking about was the issue of not being able to use used games. So we talked about this before. The companies like GameStop have created an entire revenue stream based upon the buying of people's games and the reselling of those games at a used price. And that completely cuts out the developer of the game, the publisher of the game, etc. That's pure profit for GameStop, completely cutting out the people responsible for the creation of that title. So the used game...
Not as though the creator of the title was going to make any more money off that media anyway.
Right. The idea, though, is the controversy right now in that space is that if the used game industry didn't exist, that more people would be buying new copies, and therefore the developers would be recouping the appropriate amount of money that they need to justify continued game development.
It's the RIAA argument against music piracy.
And no, because
yeah,
I don't see it that way. You know me, I'm very anti-RIAA. And I think that the RIAA made one of the biggest public relations blunders in the history of public relations.
It's one of the few Venn diagram overlaps of you and Brian Kelly.
Yeah, okay, good to know. But I think this is, I actually, having been a former GameStop employee for many years, and not being a GameStop fan at all, for many, many, many reasons, I actually do side to some degree with the gaming industry in the fact that the way that GameStop handles their used business, it does diminish the potential revenue streams in a negative way for many developers. Now, sure, companies like EA and the large multi-billion-dollar developers, that's fine. But there are many small independent developers that are being hurt by this, and it's not fair. I mean, there could be something worked out where GameStop gives a small percentage back to, you know, whoever or whatever. That could be a compromise. But because of this controversy in the used game space, Sony and Microsoft have been rumored to develop software tools that would basically hard register a piece of media to a console, much in the way that some pieces of DRM for PC games do now.
It'd be very easy to do. I mean, in the same way we have a MAC address, you know, you can have a unique identifier associated with a disc.
Nintendo does it right now, actually, not with their discs, but with their actual downloads. Their downloadable games are hard-coded to a specific console and cannot be transferred. Unless you send that console to Nintendo and have it transferred to a new console.
And, I mean, media sales in general, all the various ecologies, whether it be Google Play or Amazon or any of these other media providers, all do this. I mean, it's nearly impossible to take a movie that you bought from Amazon and play it anywhere else because the DRM prevents that. And it's inherent in the file itself that it came from this place, it's to be played in this place, and it shall not be played anywhere else, aside from MP3s, for example.
But I will say this, most of those DRM providers, Amazon, Apple, Google, Valve with the Steam platform, Microsoft with Xbox Marketplace, Sony with the PlayStation Marketplace, the one thing about all those marketplaces that's different than what you've just described is that if I sign into my account on another device, I'm still eligible to use those purchases on no matter what device I'm using.
Right. A potentially beautiful aspect of that is that I can get to my entire library of media from wherever I'm logged in.
Exactly, and those companies that I just mentioned have embraced that and they've championed it. Whereas, like I said, Nintendo is not embracing that at all, and it's actually come up a couple times with the launch of the new Wii U, and has been a big public relations, stain for them.
Well, it seems to me from the outside, and I am definitely a gaming outsider. Matter of fact, I have a T-shirt now. That Nintendo is already up shit's creek because they're not really embracing their customers, protecting their customers, or doing anything to help their customers. And the Wii U, while it excites some users, is not necessarily engaging new customers in the way that they had hoped. So why are they not finding a way to embrace their customers and show their customers that they'll do whatever's possible to make it easier for their users to use games?
Well, there's a lot of problems going on in the Nintendo, and I think it's mostly to do with the leadership going from Japan right now. And I think that's a lot of the mistakes from in Nintendo's operational aspects are coming from mismanagement from Japan. But like we said, all these other companies are embracing the fact that okay, we're using some sort of DRM, but we're being pretty liberal about how you can use your purchases, which is good. So, like I said, the rumors were Microsoft and Sony were going to implement very strict technology to prevent used game sales. So that question was specifically asked to the president of the PlayStation division after the presentation by multiple media sources. Initially, his response was, absolutely, we are not going to require any game developer to disable used games. He said that there are tools to prevent that, and they will leave it up to the individual developers to decide whether or not to use them. So that was the initial response. After that, though, it came out through multiple sources that there was some backtracking by Sony Public Relations, and instead of the answer being sort of a definitive, this system has the capabilities, but we're not requiring it to be used, it went to a more muddled, unclear, gray area. So we're kind of back to where we started with no clear answer.
It seems to me, though, there's no incentive for the developers to not use the option, and that Sony will probably, in back rooms, say, yeah, it's an option, you better do it.
I don't think so. I don't think they would go that route, and I think we kind of talked about that a little bit last week. I think that given some of the major public relations faux pas that they've had to deal with over the past 2 to 3 years, that if that were to happen, it would definitely get out in the gaming press, and that would definitely hurt any positive gains that Sony's made since recovering from those faux pas. So I don't think they would make a hard requirement if that end up being the case. I end up thinking that that original statement by the president will end up being true, that the tools are there and they're not going to force anybody to use them. And, but I think they want to take a wait-and-see attitude to see what Microsoft decides, because the rumors for the Xbox are still saying always-on internet connection are going to be required, and that anti-use game technology is going to be a component of that as well. Like requirements. So I think if Microsoft does follow through on that, Sony could say, "Listen, we're the open choice of the two," or they could jump on board with Microsoft and say, "Well, we need to do this to protect our developers." So they could go either way, and they could use that go the other way from Microsoft and capitalize on that aspect of it, of saying, "Listen, we're the open platform. We don't care what's going on."
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, it's going to be very exciting to see what happens over the next couple months. Like I said, June is the big E3 event, and rumors are already saying that Microsoft might even do an announcement as soon as April, ahead of E3. to kind of take away some of the thunder from Sony's announcement last week. So it'll be exciting to see what happens. This is always a time of year that I get very excited for, and I always get excited for new console launches too, because it only happens once every 5 years. Usually this time it's been 8 years, which is the longest it's ever been between console generations. And many analysts are predicting this to be the final console generation ever. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens.
And I guess we'll take a wait-and-see approach, too, to see what the final results are for our predictions.
Exactly. I think we'll be talking about this topic a few more times between now and June. So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
So I have a new prediction for you.
Okay.
Something to consider, anyway. And this is a little bit of a shout-out to Princeton. And I know that tonight the council chamber was packed because I have a friend who was there. That's Crystal from Planet Princeton. She was chatting with me, and she was saying that there were a lot of people present at the council chamber because they are talking about the new proposed changes to Route 1. You familiar with these changes, Sean?
I'm not. Let's hear them. Let's talk about them right now. Here we go. Customer and the service being government, being the service, and us being the travelers using the roads being the customers. So let's talk about it. In
this particular case, I guess it would be more sensible to look at the Department of Transportation, the NJDOT.
Okay.
And it would be easiest to show you the maps of things that are being proposed as change. And we also at some point should talk about the arts changes on campus, just because I think that would be interesting. It's really drastic changes to the way that we travel down there. But the Route 1 changes are a continued effort to try to make traffic flow better. And one of the changes, for example, is the intersection of Washington and Route 1.
Very well. Know it very well.
And that's a pretty crazy intersection there.
I avoid it at all costs.
Me too. I always go to, on the other end of town.
Scudder's Mills or Alexander?
Say this again?
Scudder's Mills or Alexander?
Not Scudder's Mills, but the road into Princeton there.
Yeah, Alexander. That's the other one. Those are the two. Oh, Harrison Street?
Harrison Street, yeah. I always go to Harrison Street and, travel out.
Well, just for a second, why don't we just explain to people what exactly the Washington Route 1 intersection is. So in New Jersey, we have things called roundabouts or circles, which typically means there's no intersection, and you go around a circle and you get off the section of the circle that corresponds with the road and the direction that you want to go in, right? So exactly. This intersection that we're speaking about is an actual major intersection, typical T, with a circle incorporated into it as well, a full circle.
Right, so, and you really have to have some familiarity with that intersection, that particular intersection, because it is not quite a T, and it's not quite a circle, and if you want to go right, you have to travel with traffic in a single lane, and then suddenly hope that your timing has worked out so that you can make a right.
Right. Or
hope that your timing works out so that you can go 2 lanes over when you encounter the circle so that you can make a left. Or, try to arrange so that you can go straight. And it's very, it can be maddening. And if, like I said, if you're familiar with the circle and you know what to expect when you get up there, you have a shot. If you're a new user of that particular intersection, you're in trouble.
Not to mention there's probably 12 to 16 traffic lights at that intersection.
Easily.
I
don't know why that, but it's like the one in front of you as you're approaching, and then there's one that tells you if you can go right. There's one when you cross over so that you can continue. There's one facing the other direction in both directions. It's a crazy intersection.
So what are the changes they're talking about? Like I said, I don't know anything about it, but I'd love to hear this stuff.
So you should do a search on the map, but
we'll post it on the Facebook tonight.
We'll put it on the Facebook page. The one of the changes is a circle that people turn off to at Washington in order to cross back over the intersection.
What, jug handle?
It's a jug handle. So you travel through the intersection, go onto the jug handle,
okay,
and then travel back across Washington.
Pretty normal for New Jersey. We have
Pretty
tons of
normal
jug
for
handles.
New Jersey. It's actually seems like a sensible solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're widening the lane at Harrison, which is essential because I get stuck in that traffic every morning.
One lane in, one lane out.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about on Route 1. In other words, as you're passing the lake, you have to merge. If you're coming off of Scudder's Mill onto Route 1, you have to merge even if you want to make a right again. In other words, you're on the right lane, you have to merge into traffic and then merge back out.
Right.
And I'm sure that some DOT genius knows why that's a better solution than just having that lane go all the way down. But I can't figure it out. I'm in that lane, I want to stay in that lane, but instead I have to piss 3 people off, come in, and then turn again when I get to the gas station. And all that is between me when I'm in the lane and when I have to turn is lake. So you're telling me they can't put down like pylons and just put asphalt there and let me stay in that lane and turn into Harrison? That doesn't make sense to me.
Mm.
I don't know if that's part of the plan, but we really should share the plan. So my prediction is that ultimately these changes will go into place, as opposed to not. And I guess it's really hard for you to make the prediction without, but we're going to have some time between when it happens and or if it does not.
Well, you know what I'm going to say? I'm actually going to say that those plans that you're talking about are not going to happen. I'll take that stance now. And the reason for that is because we had that pilot program a couple months ago where no left turns were allowed at all. And people were just like ready to murder anybody with a DOT hat. Yeah. And I think that anything else, any changes to that intersection at all, even though it is a horrible clusterfuck of whatever you want to call it, any other changes, people are just going to be like, it's going to be worse, we're not going to do it, so, damned if you do, damned if you don't, and I think that's definitely what they're dealing with, so I'm going to be very skeptical about those plans coming through.
All right, I'm going to be very optimistic in this case.
All right.
I want to ask you a related question. You remember when you used to be able to take a jug handle in order to cross over Route 1 to get into
Nassau Park.
Nassau Park?
Yep.
You remember when they closed that?
Yes, I do.
Do you feel like that change has greatly improved traffic flow?
I do, actually.
I think I do too.
Those changes happened when I was an undergraduate at Ryder, and we lived for 2 years with that jug handle and 2 years without it, and then I obviously continued because I stayed here. I definitely think they did a lot to clear out all the intersections from Route 1 all the way to Washington, and they did an excellent job, and that flows wonderfully in the morning. Doesn't flow so well at night, though, for some reason. I think that's got more to do with the merging at Quaker Bridge Road. Where how it divides for Province Line. I think that's another area that needs to be looked at. But I think
I also usually when I have to make the decision of, let's say I'm getting on 95 and I'm traveling down to 95. Often I'll just take the back road, honestly. Mm-hmm. But if I'm on Route 1 and I'm going to 95, usually I will stay in the Quaker Bridge traffic on the right-hand side, even though I'm supposed to follow the left-hand side, and I find it a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
You're not alone in that. I know many people that also follow that same logic.
Yeah, I mean, I will follow people all the way through, and they will just, not turn into any of that shopping.
Right.
And I don't know. I just find it odd. It's such a problem, traffic in this area. and it seems like it's solvable. You know, the right combination of traffic possibilities would make us all be able to travel, because it's a straight road. You know, people are turning off, but if they had the right intersections and they had the right traffic lights, I'm I'm definitely not asking for more traffic lights. But it seems like if it was arranged in the proper way, and there are people who study this their entire life, it would do the job.
You're right. I subscribe to that too.
All right, my friend. Well, we have a light prediction. We will have better predictions next week after we review the map.
Yes.
And anything else you'd like to say, Sean?
I'd like to give a shout out to Comixology. Are you familiar with Comixology, John?
Comixology was actually talked about at the New Jersey Tech Meetup tonight.
Really?
It was.
Let's talk about them just for a little bit, since we are under time. So let's have a little chat about them.
Okay.
My whole life, well, I started out as a kid as a comic book reader. My mom got me into comics. God bless my mother. She's still with me. But she's the reason that I loved comics as a kid, and she got me started with Batman and Speed Racer. And when I lived in Voorhees is when I got into it, and we had a comic shop on Route 37 called the Comic Zone, and she would take me, probably once a month to go, and she would help me pick comics out. And to her credit, she never really did a great job of perusing the content of those comics. And one incident comes to mind where she bought me a copy of the graphic novel The Killing Joke, which is the Alan Moore origin story of the Joker, which is a pretty fucked up story. It's also, for those of you that don't know, it gives you the explanation of why Barbara Gordon is paralyzed, because the Joker shoots her in the spine. So I wanted this book. I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew it was about the Joker, and my mom saw in very tiny print. I still have the original book too. In very tiny print, it said "Parental Guidance Suggested." And my mom asked the guy behind the counter, my son's 9. Is this really appropriate for him? Why does it say this? And he's like, it's just a little. They say the shit once in a while, and there's some guns. Nothing major though. And my mom was like, all right. And she bought it for me. But little did she know, it's considered, by many to be one of the most disturbing Batman tales ever told. So at some point in my life, I stopped going. I was probably when I moved away from Voorhees, I stopped going to the comic book store. Tom's River didn't really have any comic book stores at the time. They now have one now, but I never got into it. And so I lost touch with Batman, and I lost touch with what was going on in the superhero space, and I just didn't give a crap. But I always kind of had in the back of my mind, wow, wouldn't it be great to get back into it? And so two things kind of happened at the same time. One, I discovered the Comixology app, which is an app for iPhone, Android, Windows 8, and web browsers. And basically it's a marketplace for Marvel, DC, and all other major comic book publishers except for Dark Horse. That's the only company that's not in the marketplace. And you can buy digital copies of comics that you can read wherever you go on the go. This was perfect for me because a couple years ago there was a big summer crossover event for DC called Final Crisis. Every summer DC and Marvel do like a big story that runs the whole length of the summer to get people excited. And the Final Crisis was this big story, and I was like, I'm going to read this. And then also Batman Rest in Peace was going on at the same time, and I was like, I'm going to read that too. So this was before Comixology really kind of was taking off. So every week I was going to the comic book store in the Mercer Mall, which was a really horrible experience for me because the guy behind the counter just was like comic book guy from The Simpsons, and it was not fun. So then eventually I just started to buy them physical copies of the comic books from a website and have them shipped to me.
And worst insults ever.
And it just got too ridiculous, and so I gave up. I was like, this is retarded. I'm not dealing with this. So fast forward to probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I discovered Comixology and was like, holy crap, I can just buy a digital copy of the comic book. I don't have to worry about comic books taking up space in my basement, and I can just read it wherever I go. And, new comics are priced the same price as they are when they're released, $2.99, $3.99. But once it's been out for a while, they drop the price to $1.99 or 99 cents, and then they do freebies all the time. And then they have crazy sales on back issues a lot and collected editions on this site. So because of this, it made me get back into comics way easier. Combine that with the fact that DC rebooted their entire universe, and they threw out all the mythology that we know about superheroes and started from scratch with all of them as part of their New 52 program. I was able to get back into comics, no problem. So now I'm reading The Walking Dead because I'm a huge fan of the show. So I caught up on all 100 and whatever issues of The Walking Dead. I did not buy them all, I will admit, but I got caught up to a certain point, and I've purchased every issue for the last 6 months now, and I read it as it comes out. And I've been catching up on some of the Batman stories weekly, and it's great because I love Batman. He's really the only superhero I give a crap about, always have and always will care about him. And so it's really wonderful to be able to get back in touch with something I loved as a kid and still love today, and I hope more people check out Comixology if you've never heard of it. And I'd love to hear what you heard at the meetup tonight about it.
Well, the meetup tonight was an angel investor who listed all of his various investments, and one of the investments, his name's Brian. I can't remember his last name, but he was representing New York Angels, and the one thing that he said that everybody recognized was he was a original investor in Pinterest.
Oh.
Like big time. But he also mentioned he was really excited about comics, and he said that one of his favorite investments was Comixology. And I had never heard of it. And then it's so strange you brought it up. Hold on. So
alarm dismissed.
The other thing is that, have you ever heard of Graphically?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything other than the name of it.
Graphically sounds an awful lot like Comixology.
What is it called?
I've used Graphically. Graphically is an Android app, an iPhone app, and also you can use it on Chrome. So as long as you log into your account and the account's free, there are freebies there, so you can go and check it out. But it's the same thing, and one of the things that's really nice about it is its page-turning mechanism, I thought. And I went and purchased a couple issues of The Walking Dead, because I'm really into the show. And I wanted to ask you, you're familiar with the show and familiar with the series in comic form, in graphic form.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a good correlation between the two media?
Yeah, and I'm going to say this. I talk about this every week with my friend Frank, actually, because he's also an avid reader of the comic. Well, the thing we love about what's going on is that we feel that there were certain decisions made in the comic book that were kind of like, when they happened at the time. But you got to understand, it's been published for over 10 years.
Yeah. So
there's certain kind of mistakes, quote unquote, were made through the telling of the tale, and so they're kind of correcting those mistakes with the TV series, and they're also diverging from the story in ways that I think improves upon the overall mythology in the TV show. So I think the TV show, while I love the comic book very much, I love what's going on in the comic book right now. I think the TV show is like the better version of the mythology. One example that I like to cite is that with what's going on now in the TV show with the governor, the governor is this very ambiguous character in the TV show. We know he's kind of bad, but he also has a good side to him, sort of, and he walks this fine line of horrible guy and nice guy, and you're not sure where he's going to end up or if the niceness is an act. When you meet the governor in the comic book, he's a horrible guy right away, and you know he's bad news. So that whole ambiguity of the governor, I feel, is really strong for the TV series because it keeps you.
I've heard people say this. Where do you feel like the governor has a good part of his persona?
Well, the way he is, how inviting he is to people and to join Woodbury, like you saw in last night's episode.
He's deceptive.
He is, but there is. I mean, I feel like he does.
I'm trying to clarify. You're not saying he has a good part of his persona. You're saying he's deceptively good.
Yeah, but I think he does generally care for the people in Woodbury, and that's not necessarily the case in the comic book. I think the governor in the TV series does care about those people, and he does feel a responsibility to protect them at any cost, which means him to do horrible things to people.
Yeah.
And in the comic book, he just basically protects those people because they keep him alive and allow him to continue to be powerful and exist. And he is just awful at all turns. You know what I mean? And people fear him. I don't think the citizens of Woodbury at this point fear the governor.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to have a conversation about that. You ever watch The Talking Dead?
I do. I watch it once in a while. When Comic Book Men was on after it, I watched it more, but I haven't really been watching it lately because Comic Book Men's on Thursdays. So
yeah, why did they make that change?
That was stupid. I don't know.
No customer service there.
No, but I would like to say, John, that there's been some really good comics that I've been reading, and I'm not sure if that's something you're into. But I think you should definitely check out Comixology. There's, like I said, tons of free comics. You can get a lot of first issues and series for free, and so you can dabble and see different stories that you might be interested.
I'm very interested. I wonder. I happen to know you, and we have conversations all the time, and we go as far as to get online and talk like this. Does Comixology have a social media aspect that allows people to have conversations or share issues or have some sort of a social layer?
Outside of like the standard Facebook sharing, I think that's about all you can do at this point.
Because that would be really interesting. In other words, I just read this graphic novel, and here's a synopsis of it, and here's why I think that you might like it too. You could do that on Facebook, but there is more likely a reasonable audience that would not be turned off to that in
the website.
In Comixology.
Right. Yeah, no, like I said, the standard Pinterest, Tumblr, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, and email sharing exists. And they do allow you to rate individual issues on a 5-star scale, but that's it. There's no commentary or reviews or anything like that.
Do you have your own page on Comixology that people could visit in order to see how you rated?
No, actually. Very limited. It's really just a traditional marketplace. But I feel like we could just maybe we put together a Tumblr or something, and we just comment on issues and have a dialogue, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I think about like Goodreads. Like I remember I was on Facebook one day and I saw that you had just finished a book via Goodreads.
I do. I use whenever I do read a graphic novel or a collected edition of multiple issues. If I do read it in a hard physical form, I do add it to my Goodreads, but lately with Comixology, I haven't been buying too many physical copies.
Interesting. All right, well, I'm going to check it out.
Good. I look forward to talking to you more about comics offline.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Thanks as always. It was a really good time hanging out with you, and I will probably see you this week in person, but I will definitely see you this time next week.
Absolutely. See you then.
Cheers, bro.
Bye.